The Legend of Kung Fu Kenny, Overly Dedicated. Chapter 3. Night of the Living Dead. Inspired by Night of the Living Junkies. Play Night of the Living Junkies after listening to this chapter. The city pulsed like a dying heart, its streets clogged with bodies that moved without direction. Junkies, dealers, lost souls, ghosts still walking. Kendrick strode past their hollowed-out eyes, their sunken frames, their hands reaching for something, anything that might make the hunger stop. He knew that hunger, not for drugs, for more, for escape, for power, for something real in a world made of smoke. I remember, when my uncles served smokers on Alondra. They used to be kings. Now, their thrones were abandoned, their crowns rusted, because Black Marrow owned the bones of this city. And Kendrick was walking straight into his crypt. The House of Marrow wasn't a place. It was a feeding ground. A system where men traded their bones for power. A system where loyalty was currency and freedom was a joke. A single red lantern swayed outside the door, glowing like an open wound. Kendrick stepped inside. Heat, smoke, the stench of sweat, fear, and something sweeter. Poison wrapped in comfort. Junkies leaned against walls, whispering prayers to a god they no longer believed in. Killers sat at low tables, waiting, eyes watching, hands flexing, and at the center of it all, Black Marrow. Black Marrow didn't move, didn't need to. He sat like a king draped in black silk, rings of jade and ivory on his fingers, trophies of men he had owned. His eyes weren't hollow. Hollow things could be filled. Black Marrow was beyond that. "Kenny," he said, voice smooth, rich with amusement, like he already knew how the night would end. "I've been expecting you. This shit is so dope, you might want to be my crack hoe." A lacquered tray appeared, a single cup, steam curled from the dark liquid inside. Kendrick didn't need to ask. He already knew. This wasn't just a drink. It was a brand, a seal, a deal that couldn't be undone. He lifted the cup, paused, then he set it down. "I'd rather die thirsty than drown in that." Silence. Black Marrow's lips curled into a slow smile. "Good," he murmured. "Then let's see if you can swim." The air shifted. Kendrick felt it before he saw it. A shadow moved. A blade slid toward his ribs. He turned, just in time to see Tone. Tone, his brother, his shadow, his executioner. "Man, you should have just drank." Kendrick caught the wrist, twisted. The blade clattered to the floor. A single, fluid movement. His palm struck Tone's chest, sending him stumbling back. "Enough," Black Marrow said, rising to his feet. The room held its breath, because this wasn't a deal anymore. This was a sentence. Black Marrow unfastened his rings one by one, setting them neatly on the table. "You think you're different," he murmured, stepping forward. "But you walked in here, same as the rest of them. You're not fighting me." His eyes locked onto Kendrick's. "You're fighting yourself." Then he moved. The first move was a shockwave. Black Marrow exploded forward, his entire body launching like a wrecking ball, aiming to crush Kendrick with sheer force. Kendrick flowed around the impact, stepping aside with the ease of a wave retreating from shore. Marrow's momentum shifted instantly, his elbow already snapping downward, sharp as a guillotine. Kendrick dipped low, the wind of the strike whispering past his scalp. He countered, his right arm uncoiled like a whip, palms striking toward Marrow's ribs with pinpoint accuracy. But Marrow twisted, absorbing the hit and retaliating in the same breath. His fingers snapped into a claw-like grip, seizing Kendrick's wrist, twisting it violently. Pain jolted through Kendrick's arm, but he spun with the motion, his free hand shooting toward Marrow's jaw. Marrow released at the last second, ducking beneath the strike. Then, he attacked again. The fight was a blur of motion. Every strike met with a counter. Every counter met with a reversal. This wasn't just combat. This was a war of minds, patience, and precision. Kendrick saw the opening. Marrow had committed too hard, his balance compromised for just a moment. Kendrick moved without hesitation. His first strike drove into Marrow's knee, forcing his stance to buckle. Marrow gritted his teeth, bracing for the counterattack. But Kendrick was already there. He twisted, a downward hammer fist crashing into Marrow's collarbone with bone-shattering force. Marrow's body lurched from the impact, his breath ripping out in a hoarse gasp. His arms trembled, but he wasn't down yet. Kendrick stepped forward, redirecting Marrow's last desperate punch, twisting it aside before driving a short-range palm strike into his sternum. Marrow staggered back breathless, and Kendrick sealed the fight with a final decisive move. He dropped low, sweeping one leg outward, scything Marrow's remaining balance from beneath him. Marrow slammed to the ground, coughing violently, his body finally giving out. A beat passed. Then Kendrick stepped past him. Marrow lay in the dirt, broken. His breaths were shallow, and for the first time he looked up at someone else. Kendrick turned, walked through the ruined wall. Nobody moved to stop him. Nobody dared, because tonight, Kendrick didn't escape. He erased the chains that had been waiting for him, and left the king to drown I in his own broken empire. The air inside the House of Marrow was thick with silence. Junkies, enforcers, and killers stood frozen, their eyes darting between the broken wall and the man who had ruled them for years, now lying in the dirt. Black Marrow was still breathing, but his rule was over. The whispers started. First a murmur, then a ripple through the room. He's gone. Kenny really walked out like that? Marrow's finished. No one stepped forward. No one moved to pick him up, because the truth settled over them like dust in the ruins. A king who couldn't defend his throne wasn't a king anymore. The House of Marrow had fallen, and in its place, nothing. For now, because the streets never stayed quiet for long.